The History Things podcast is brought to you by G.A.R. Historical, your one-stop shop for all your historical fan gear needs. Visit grhistorical.com and use the promo code HISTORYTHINGS to receive 10% off your next purchase. Thanks for listening. Now let's start the show.
Are you ready?
Welcome, everybody, to the History Things podcast. I'm your host, Matt Borders. With me, as always, but in a COVID fashion, I have my co-host, Pat McGuire. Pat, how's it going, buddy?
It's going good, man. Mother Nature opened up the snow clouds on us this morning.
Yeah, it did. We've got a bit of a storm rolling over. It crushed my folks and family back in Michigan, and now it's rolled eastward, and it's hitting Maryland.
Yeah, it was coming down pretty fast. Obviously, you were supposed to be here in the new and improved, in process War Department studios. Obviously, we have a kind of big update coming on that front in a few weeks, so stay tuned. But obviously, Mother Nature botched that for us. So good thing we had the COVID fallback plan where we all learned how to do this socially distant, over the last year or so. So good thing we got the Zoom and all that stuff. So good to see you through the computer again, Matty B. Good to be back. But did you notice something a little different at the beginning of the show this morning?
I certainly did, Pat. We've got ourselves a sponsor.
That's right. We're very excited. Obviously, if you tuned in from the very first moments of the show for this episode, you heard that the episode was introed a little differently. We are sponsored by G.A.R. Historical now. We partnered with Dave over there. Obviously, we're very excited to help him get his awesome, sort of like, cool, hip way of interacting with history out there. He's got the access. He makes all these really cool, like shirts and stickers and really cool stuff that, just people like me, I love stuff. Stickers on guitars, stickers on computers. I love wearing, shirts that are kind of quippy and all that stuff. And historically referenced that almost nobody else gets because they're not as cool as us. And he was awesome enough in our partnership with him to give us a code, History Things. If you use History Things, we're so famous, Matt. We have a code now. A promo code. We're
getting up there. That's
right. If you use promo code History Things over on trhistorical.com, you can get 10% off your next purchase. So you'll be hearing a little bit more from Dave and us in the future. So we're very excited for that. That was something very cool for us. We've been working really hard over last year, and we felt that we should just acknowledge that that is something we've just recently announced, and we're pumped about it. So we hope you guys are too. All right, well, we're back. We're ready to do our first follow-up of season 2. I'm super pumped. Let's get us going, Matty B.
Absolutely, and it is our first follow-up episode of season 2, and back with us today is our friend Ben Frail, the National Patriotic Instructor for the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War. Ben, how are you doing, sir?
Good. How are you guys doing?
We're snowed in, but it's doing pretty good thus far.
Welcome back, buddy.
Awesome. Thanks for having me back. So it's a pleasure to be here again.
Excellent. Now, before we jump into questions and things, something else is going on today. Isn't that right, Pat?
That's right. It's Super Bowl Sunday. And, we touched on this in the main episode in quarter 1. We touched on the fact that Ben, who is anchored out of West Warwick area, Rhode Island, middle of nowhere, New England. It's like, I made that joke because West Warwick is a town that nobody's ever heard of, but miraculously in the last year, I've met 10 people from this small town. And it's super weird that none of you all even know each other. I don't understand. Rhode Island is so small, but yet you don't know each other, but whatever. But we discovered during this chat that Ben not only is a New Englander who roots for all the teams you would expect a New Englander to root for, because I've seen you in the Sox gear. You sent me that Tessie stuff last night, that garbage crap.
Yep.
I'm a Yankees fan. I hate that crap. But this guy doesn't root for one of the most shocking teams, considering how successful they were. Ben is a Panthers fan. in New England, a Carolina Panthers fan. So on Super Bowl Sunday, you know, after I was shocked that he didn't, root for the Patriots during their 20-year dominance over the NFL, here we are on another Super Bowl Sunday with New England's favorite son, Tom Brady, once again playing in the Super Bowl, his 10th, a historic feat, which one day, Matt, I will convince you to let us do a sports-themed history things show where I just nerd on you in a way you have never seen before.
I'm okay with that idea. But
all right. You heard it here, folks. Matt's into it. But yeah, so Ben, Tom Brady's back in the Super Bowl. Yep. You are not a Patriots fan, but you are somehow a New Englander. I don't know how you can claim that if you're not a Patriots fan. But tell me your thoughts. How do you feel, man? We got the Bucs. We got touchdown Tommy, who basically said, "Who wants to go to the Super Bowl?" The Bucs were like us. Up against Pat Mahomes and the Chiefs, who is probably going to be the next Tom Brady. What do you got? Give us a Super Bowl pick.
You know, even though I'm a Panthers fan, you know, I've always rooted for the Patriots when they're not playing the Panthers.
That's fair.
So, you know, I still got a soft spot in my heart for Tommy Touchdown, and you know, my heart is hoping that he gets his 7th Super Bowl win. But you know, Mahomes' high flying offense with the Chiefs is. You know, when you got Kelsey and Tyreek Hill and you know, that's going to be tough to cover. I know the first matchup earlier in the season was close. And, you know, I think the Bucs are going to pull it out because they're, you know, first meeting was early on in the season. They weren't all on the same page, and then they added Antonio Brown, which, you know what he does off the field is
weirdo.
Yeah, big time. But you can't deny his talent on the field, matched up with, you know, Mike Evans and Godwin, and you know, and then you got Gronk. You know. Brady's whoopee, his little his baby blanket.
Dude, he is the security blanket of blankets. Oh my god. Oh yeah. So, all right, so give us a score. So obviously we get it. You're picking the Bucs because I'm picking the Bucs. I love Pirates. Yep. Matt is picking the Bucs because he loves Pirates as well. I got him to dress up like a pirate once for Halloween with me. It was great. So
I'm just glad you guys said which teams were playing because I didn't even know.
God, dude, you know what? That's a true story. I can't even believe that. Like, Matt just does not watch football. So when I talk to him about the Giants and he's just like, dude, I don't.
You guys are rattling off names and stats, which is great. But I can't do that unless we're talking, say, the Army of the Potomac or something.
I'll just say, from what I've learned from you, from your nerddom over the years that I've known you, Brady and Mahomes would be like level 20 Dungeons and Dragons characters. You know, they're serious. I guess that's a thing. Did I get that right, D&D crowd?
Ish.
Oh, sorry. Ish. Look, I'm learning, okay? This is an art. Anyway, so, all right, Ben, give us a score, because obviously when this episode airs, it's going to come out a couple days after the Super Bowl has played out. Yeah. So this, you know, we're putting it on record so that you can say, I predicted this, because it's about 10:09 in the morning on Super Bowl Sunday, February 7th, 2021. So, Ben, prediction, go.
35-32 Bucs.
Wow, that close of a game.
Yep,
what a banger.
It's going to be a close, high-scoring game. You know, both teams have the ability to score quick and score often, and I think that's what's going to it's gonna come down to a defensive stand. That I honestly think that the Chiefs will have the ball late, and the Bucs will stop them.
Do you realize you just predicted possibly the greatest Super Bowl ever with that close of a score, predicting its ending on a defensive stand? Like, Ben, you are giving me hopes and expectations that are going to produce lots of football anxiety today.
Well, I hope
you're right.
I'm also a defensive-minded guy where, you know, my brother's also a Panthers fan, so we joke back and forth where we'll sit there and be like, I'll message him. I'm like, dude, your offense needs to score. And he'll be like, no, man, your defense needs to stop someone. All the jerseys I have are defensive players. All the jerseys he has is offensive players. So
you're a big fan of, let's say, what's a good defensive strategy militarily? You're a big fan of, like, entrenching and securing your lines, things like that, fighting from breastworks. You'd rather play defense than go on an offensive, is what you're saying?
When it comes to football, I'd rather play defense. Militarily, I'm a big fix and flank guy.
Ooh, wild card.
So
classic.
I'm you know, either that or if you can get a good pincer movement going, that's another one that I'm a fan of.
Oh, Hugh Mercer maybe pulls off one of the greatest double envelopment pincer moves ever, but that's for another day. All right, look, enough of stuff Matt knows nothing about. All right, I feel really bad. We just kind of put Matt in the corner for a minute. Matt doesn't give a crap about football at all. So, Matt, we got a follow-up episode. We got a ton of great questions. Let's just get right into it. I got the first question up. This comes from Lana in Ottawa. Our friend from Canada, north of the border there. Thanks for checking in, Lana. She asks, Ben, how did the G.A.R. Words are hard. How did the G.A.R. help with the establishment of battlefield monuments or battlefield preservation in the years after the war?
So their role was big in, you know, obviously it wasn't as big as other people. Like you got Dan Sickles, who was massive in battlefield preservation after the war, but they kind of took that under the all-encompassing of we want these guys who never made it home to be remembered. We don't want them to be forgotten. So a lot of the monuments you see on the battlefields, yeah, they might be a unit monument. So like the Second Rhode Island Monument at the Battle of Gettysburg, you know, it was put up by Rhode Islanders, it was put up by the Second Rhode Island Committee, but the majority of them were members of the G.A.R. So it was kind of like what we talked about last episode, where you had guys who were in multiple organizations that their purpose and their mission statement really intertwined with each other. So you see a lot of that happening where, you know, on the battlefields themselves, you see it more so locally and at the towns where monuments in the town and monuments in the cities at home are created by the G.A.R. posts, or cemetery plots are created with massive monuments in the center of the cemetery plot that, you know, the G.A.R. post bought the cemetery plot, paid for the monument, and things of that nature. You also have to remember, back then, going to the cemetery was a different idea. You would have families that would go and have a picnic at a loved one's grave. Whereas today, it's, you know, you go, you lay flowers, you're there 5-10 minutes, and then you leave. So the culture behind the cemetery back then was a lot different as well. That's why you see a lot of the cemeteries, the G.A.R. posts have monuments in them, because they to them, that was a focal point of the community. So that's
even true in the older national cemeteries. You have monuments in them as opposed to just headstones. They were memorial gardens as opposed to just places of burial. That's an excellent point, Ben.
I love that you brought up Dan Sickles, because every time anybody brings up Dan Sickles, I think about the whole damn battlefield is a monument to me.
Yep. Well, it was funny. So I've got, obviously I have friends all over that are, you know, history minded. And I was talking to one of them and I was like, you know, this guy was legit crazy. And they were like, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, do you want to start off with the temporary insanity plea, or do you want to, you know, finish with the fact that he would visit his leg at the medical museum in D.C.?
Which I just realized they squeezed that into the movie Lincoln.
Did they
completely
really?
Under everybody's nose. There's a scene in the movie Lincoln where a bunch of them are standing in front of a glass box with a shattered leg, still with some flesh and stuff on it. But it's like, it's very clearly supposed to be this well-preserved. It's Dan Sickles' leg. Like, what other leg would they have boxed up and shipped in like some like official executive style place?
Yeah.
Freaking
but it was funny. And then, you know, I sent them the picture and they're like, I thought you were kidding. I'm like, no, I wasn't kidding.
No, dude. Dan Sickles loved Dan Sickles.
He did love himself some Dan Sickles. That's true.
Anyway.
All right, Ben. One of the aspects that I really found fascinating in our initial discussion was the database that the Sons of Union Veterans has been putting together. Now, are you guys trying to identify all Union burials and who was in that burial plot, or are you just trying to identify the location of all burials? Because to be perfectly honest, to try to figure out who is in all of these unknowns just seems impossible to me, unfortunately.
Daunting.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. So, we understand that it's pretty darn near impossible. And if in a perfect world where if we had millions of dollars at our fingertips for this purpose, we would want to find the burial location of every single soldier and identify who they are, and if possible, bring them home. We know that, in some cases, whether it be, that we can't find an next of kin, that won't be possible. In other cases, being able to, like in the, a few years ago, the burial pit at Bull Run,
Right.
Yep.
being able to ascertain whose bones are whose, that's going to make it difficult as well.
I mean, but you're lucky in that sense that they even have bones, right? Like we know that in the more modern sense with the Vietnam, Korean, and both World War era soldiers, like it's more realistic in the I don't know what the word, the decomposition cycle, I guess we're talking about, that their remains would still be around to get samples and testable elements out of. Like with a lot of the Civil War guys, like there's nothing left, like in these boxes, in these holes in the ground. Like you're finding fabrics, of fatigue blouses and things, buttons, belt buckles, things that they're burial shrouds, whatever, but soup, a goo. Like there's not a lot of these testable elements left. So I think with the Manassas guys, though, there were some bones, right? Like
yes,
they're actively working on, I think they're still trying to figure out who those, I don't think that's a closed case. Like I think they're still working on trying to identify, I think they know where roughly, right? Like I think some Wisconsin guys maybe were involved in that, or I don't know.
So from what my understanding was that they were Massachusetts guys.
That sounds right.
The two that were dead, but the issue they were having was that they were at the bottom of the bone pit, of an amputation pit. So they were, again, trying to ascertain which bones were the bodies and which bones were amputations was proving difficult at certain points. But then they ended up finding out who. I don't know I can't remember if they found out definitely who they were. I think they were able, based off the buttons, were able to pinpoint the unit. But I don't think they were ever able to find out specifically who they were.
I believe their unit history was of help. They said they had buried two guys out in that general vicinity, and they were able to build off of that to help identify them. But you're right, Ben. I'm not certain if they've been definitively identified yet or not. And I know Park Service is always going to be real hesitant to definitively say this is them.
As of 2018, the parks, I'm looking right now, their official tagline was they still don't really know who these guys are.
I mean, even with our our project in Rhode Island that we spoke about last time, with Private McElroy, the only reason why we knew that it was him was because somehow, some way, the box he was in wasn't destroyed. It was still labeled Michael McElroy, and that's how we were able to ascertain his 100% positive identification.
That's wild.
Yeah, we knew, like I said last time, we knew that there were two other veterans, but we couldn't figure out whose bones were who from the rest of the bones. So we weren't able to give those two veterans proper honorings. But so it's an uphill battle. It's definitely an uphill battle. Right now we're working on, let's find the ones that we know who they are and where they are, or not necessarily where they are, but we know who they are, and get them on the database. There's still tons of work to be done with that, as far as, you got little family plots and cemeteries. I mean, if you're from New England or if you're from an older town, forget just New England, that there's tons of historic cemeteries that might just have 10 or 15 people buried in it, and that's it. The town I grew up in Coventry, which is right next to West Warwick, there's over 130 historic cemeteries in the town. And the majority of them only have 20 burials, just because, again, family plots, or a lot of Coventry was farmland up until I mean, there's still some farms in it, but, you know, up until the early 1900s, it was farmland. So it's just
you see that in the Midwest too, where it's just these little little plots out in the middle of nowhere, mostly family plots.
So that kind of ties perfectly into the next question, guys. So we talked about how people interacted with cemeteries differently. You know, once upon a time, they were more a place of actual memorial. We went and spent time, you know, in the location of our beloved, dearly departed and things like that. And now, like Ben, as you say, right, we pay our respects, but it's more of a quick, like, hey, I miss you. There's a prayer sometimes, things like that. We say some words and then we roll. It's not usually as more of an engaged event. So how did Decoration Day come about? Because I imagine that sort of stems from events in these small places where they're spending time in these cemeteries, right? They're memorializing places. I know that John Logan is a G.A.R. member, obviously. So how does Decoration Day come about? And like, what is the G.A.R.'s role in sort of the beginning once we've got a lot of these Union venerated dead in these cemeteries, either local or in national cemeteries, things like that. So just how does it come about? And,
so
G.A.R.'s role.
So obviously there were a lot of, prior to the G.A.R. doing something officially in 1868, there were a lot of local ceremonies throughout the year, all with the same purpose of memorializing the dead from the Civil War on both sides. But the G.A.R., like I said, in 1868, General John A. Logan was the commander-in-chief of the G.A.R., and he sent out General Order 11, which is the general order we recognize that created Decoration Day as an organization. It essentially said that all departments and posts are to, on 30 May every single year, go and decorate the dead of the recent conflict. So that their brothers and comrades wouldn't be forgotten. You have many towns and states in the north who quickly say, okay, we're gonna do this. We're gonna follow the GAR's lead. And in many of these ceremonies, the GAR, while they're still around, is very prominently featured in these ceremonies. I mean, you can even see pictures from the 1930s and 40s where GAR members are either, walking themselves, which at, 90 years old is, I hope I can do that, marching a parade at 90, or they're in automobiles and in the parade themselves and taking part in these ceremonies. To, the fact that they're this old and it was still this important to them to take part in these celebrations and to us, the Sons, we still, federally Memorial Day is the fourth Monday, but we as Sons, we look at it as, okay, well, 30 May is the day that we recognize and use as Decoration Day, and we go and if we can, we do our ceremonies on those days. And luckily, I think last year was on Saturday. This year it's on a Sunday, so we'll be able to actually do ceremonies on the 30th. So it's a very big deal for us. It's actually part of our the oath we take when we're swearing in, or once we're getting our if you're taking office, whether at camp, at department, or national level, part of it is actually to say, to recognize and the day the GAR set aside as Decoration Day. That's in our oath. So even to the Sons this day, 30 May and Decoration Day is very, very close to our heart. And it is the busiest. May is the busiest time of our year. Whether it be going into cemeteries and flagging veterans' graves, or cleaning up cemeteries, preparing and doing the logistics for ceremonies, getting reenactors out to do firing details, getting, some camps get National Guard or modern military representation at their ceremonies. So the logistics behind it, even today, is still massive, and it all started with, with the G.A.R. and with General Logan.
I discover a lot of history through happenstance, and this was one of my favorite happenstance discoveries. Was I hadn't really just gone down the how did Memorial Day get its roots, things like that. And when I was living in DC a few years back, I took a trip up to the Lincoln Cottage, which I just recently started educating Matt on the fact that Lincoln didn't even really live in the White House in the early days of his presidency all that much, because he spent some time with his family at this cottage or further into the quieter parts of DC, because remember, the Lincolns are a grieving family when they come to Washington. So, but right behind this cottage is the old soldiers' home in DC. Where you have obviously a national cemetery today. At the time, it was kind of a place to go for veterans of the Mexican-American War, and before that, veterans who were still hanging around from maybe 1812 and the like. Lincoln liked to hang around with these soldiers and things like that. It was, I'm not a Lincoln expert. We could get our buddy Cody Aish on to talk about him, I guess, at some point. But it's something I know that Lincoln definitely draws context and wisdom from, because he does spend a lot of time talking to these guys. But I know that in the cemetery there, I don't know if John Logan is either buried in that cemetery specifically right there, or if he's just got a major marker there. But they got this huge thing on, like, he's the guy that basically started Memorial Day. And I was like, holy crap. Like, I had no clue. And this was, a few years back. So it was something that always kind of just, hung in my mind as we talked to you during the initial episode, was like, hey, I actually wanted to know, how did the G.A.R. have a role in this and things like that. So that was really cool.
You got me on the side. I'm actually trying to look up where Logan's buried.
It's all good. As a dad, can I just acknowledge like how brilliant the last 3-4 minutes has been on this show and live recording? Like, we have watched this light show go on, a professional use of the mute button. Like, this is like, as from dad to dad, well done, sir. You're doing a great job. That was awesome.
Well, the light switch to my office is outside my office, so that was my 5-year-old who was.
Dude, I had to turn off my camera. I was cracking up. So
this is, like I was saying, May is our busiest month, all because of Logan and what he did to set up Decoration Day and later Memorial Day. I had a thought, and I can't remember it now.
That's because you're a dad and you have dad brain. I hear my wife talk about mom brain all the time, and like people sleep on dad brain. Like, it's a thing. Oh, yeah. I forget almost everything my wife asks me to do. You ask her that.
You were right, Pat. It is the U.S. Soldiers and Airmen's Home National Cemetery where John Logan is buried.
Awesome.
Yep.
With the discussion of Decoration Day that we've just had and our earlier discussions regarding the database, Ben, beyond that, beyond the National Grave Registration and Decoration Day, what other sort of monuments or monumentation and memorial projects is the Sons of Union Veterans involved in?
Yeah, so we actually have a national committee, and each camp and department has an officer dedicated just to monuments and memorials. And the sole purpose of that is to go around and we have a form specific to inspecting these monuments and memorials. We're in the process of developing a database for the monuments and memorials. We don't have we have a depository of all the forms currently, but we don't have a public access database. It's one of those things where the information's available to the public. You just have to email the National Monuments and Memorials Officer, and if you have a question about a form in a town or a monument in a town, if there's a form on it, he can send you the information. It tells you when it was dedicated, who dedicated it, who made it, what's it made out of, how big it is, a written description of it, and also if you have photos of it. Not a lot of people realize how many of these small, these you see a random statue in your hometown or your state, and you're just like, okay, it's a statue, whatever. And it's like, yeah, well, odds are it could be a Civil War statue. It's in Rhode Island alone, there's over 30 of them. And for a state that has 34
Wait, there's
towns,
30 Civil War statues in Rhode Island?
Yeah, there's over 30.
So is that like one every 10 feet?
No. I'm pretty sure Block Island doesn't have one. If they do, that'll give me an excuse to go out there and maybe, if I ever have my scuba license, go and explore the U-boat that sunk off the coast of Block Island. But
there you go.
We can have you back to talk about that. See, we are the History Things podcast, which means we are not stuck in any category. You want to talk U-boats? Let's go.
Yeah, I don't know much about it. I just know that she was sunk towards the tail end of World War II.
Right.
That's all.
All right, well, let's circle back to that because I got a U-boat story from Ocracoke that I'd love to talk about. So maybe one day in the future, Matt, we'll do the U-boat episode.
Yeah.
Both wars.
Sounds like a plan.
I heard you in the last response there, Ben, talk about just sort of like seeing small monuments in places, and I made the joke that Rhode Island only has one every 10 feet or whatever. But in a real sense, in our travels, this is actually a question from Matt and I, not so much from one of our listeners because we talked about this. Was in our travels, we've both noticed G.A.R. monuments in some unsuspecting places. So, like to me personally, none more unsuspecting than when I was in Stuart, Florida a few years back. I was visiting some family, driving along in a super far south place, right? We're talking Florida. And I see this Civil War looking guy, and I was like, sweet. I walk up to it expecting it to be like maybe some, Battle of Ulusty or something like that kind of acknowledgement, because I don't really know much about the Civil War in Florida. And it's a G.A.R. monument. I was like, what? Here in Florida? Yep. So how did G.A.R. posts end up so far south? And how do these posts themselves interact with the post-war South? Because, just for context, the Spanish-American War and the Philippine insurrection at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, was sort of you could make the case that it was a healing moment for North and South because they came together under the banner. They fought together once again. You had regiments from the North, regiments from the South, things like that. So, obviously this takes and is still taking a long time to heal. So having a G.A.R. post in the South, the deep South, I could imagine would have been interesting. So how did they end up there and how do they interact with the area?
Yeah. So they would essentially after the war, it's kind of like high school or college. When you graduate, everyone just goes their own way. And it's very similar to that in the Civil War, where once the regiment disbanded, you had guys who would go everywhere. I mean, they've got, we've found second Rhode Islanders in Australia. There were G.A.R. posts all over the South. How they interacted with post-war South, to be honest with you, I'm not really sure. There's not much literature I could find on that. But there had to have been some type of favorable, in my understanding, in my impression, favorable outlook on them. Because, when you told me about your story, the story of seeing the monument in Florida, I looked it up. I was like, I wonder how many G.A.R. posts were in Florida. There were 39.
Wow.
So 39 G.A.R. posts in Florida. So, it's in order to have an organization like a Union Veterans Organization thrive and be successful in the state, you've got to have some type of positive outlook or positive vibe going on there. So that's the only, that's my deductive reason, or my deductive investigation, if you will, or
I'm always of the belief with people being people that I think the desire to heal has probably always been there on some level in some case, and I think having an organization in an official capacity like the G.A.R., which was likely doing charitable things in addition to doing its, political stuff that we'll get to in a few minutes here. I imagine local communities, maybe outside of the context of the fighting and dying of the war, might not have hated the prospect of a veterans unit after the war, acknowledging kind of that everybody suffered through that same rebellion the same. So it's just something that always was on my mind, was once I realized that I was in the very bottom of the country geographically. I was down in Florida, we are at the bottom of the map, right? We're almost as far south as you could get before you start getting to other countries. and here we have Union veterans posts, and I was like, what is happening here? But then again, I'm a Yankees fan, and as you know, there are a ton of New Yorkers that go to Tampa, so historically that might have just always been a thing.
39 posts in Florida, though. That's very impressive.
Yeah,
and it also speaks well to this idea, and not just idea, but this fact that there were Unionist regiments from all the southern states.
Absolutely.
Texas, Florida, Alabama. As federal forces are pushing into these states, they are developing Union homegrown units in those states as well. And it happened in every single one of them. Of course, United States colored troops, but also local white troops as well. Yep.
And even a state like South Carolina had 9 G.A.R. posts in it. So, that was the hotbed, or the
Actually, that's a little more shocking.
Yeah, where the whole thing started, and they had multiple G.A.R. posts. So it is very interesting to look back and see, and it would definitely be an interesting research topic to see how these local posts worked with the local populace to help heal and to help and also maybe it wasn't all healing, and
I imagine
about that.
People.
So,
right.
All right, we'll do some digging, man. Get back to us on that, and we can circle up through our social media and bring you something new.
Well, that's a good piggyback, actually, into our next one. This one comes out of the Midwest, and this guest wanted to know, or a listener, I should say, wanted to know what sort of political advocacy did the G.A.R. and the Sons of Union veterans do for Union Civil War veterans?
Yep. So I'll start with the SUVCW currently. We are a nonprofit 501c3 organization, so we don't do anything politically.
Right.
It's all fundraising, and if we sit there and we do something, it's by our own hand. As far as the G.A.R. is concerned, they were very politically active. There were 5 U.S. presidents, all on the Republican ticket, that were fully endorsed by the G.A.R. In fact, there was a good 20-30 year span where you couldn't get the Republican nomination without the G.A.R. support. Those presidents were, obviously Grant, Rutherford B. Hayes, James Garfield, William McKinley, and Benjamin Harrison. So clearly not too good of luck with them surviving their presidency. But yeah, and we also know for a fact that 4 of them were in the G.A.R. themselves: Grant, Hayes, McKinley, and Harrison. There is a mention of Garfield when he was assassinated. There's a mention that I could find in one proceedings book, but it's unclear. They use the word comrade in there, which is how they refer to each other, was comrades. Us and the Sons, we refer to each other as brothers. But in the G.A.R. it was comrades, and it's tough to see what the context is in that proceedings book, because they're essentially stating their remorse for the death of our comrade James A. Garfield, President of the United States, is what it actually says. So are they saying comrade in the fact that, okay, he was a veteran of the Civil War, or are they saying comrade in the fact that he was also a member of the G.A.R.? To my knowledge, we haven't been able to find him on any of the post rolls or any type of information of that, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means we haven't found it yet. I can tell you there are a ton of SUVCW camps named after him. But
we're just gonna go with it. We'll just assume he was one of us.
It is pretty. I seem to think that using the term comrade, and this is my personal opinion, using the term comrade points towards he was a member. Because I've seen other proceedings books where veterans who weren't members aren't referred to as comrade.
But isn't it weird that there's no evidence of it, because he's a high profile person for a very long time?
Very, very weird. Very weird. That's the seed of doubt. That is 100% the seed of doubt.
It's the Mandela effect. He wasn't. This is the genie movie with Sinbad of
Sinbad,
the 19th
yep.
century.
I was just thinking that. Was it Kazam? Is that what it's?
Dude, Shazam, which tells me what song it is now. But the internet's trying to tell me that Sinbad said it was a real movie, so now I know nothing.
I thought he said it wasn't a real movie.
See? None of us. Was it Yanni or Laurel? Was the dress green or was it blue or gold? What color was it? I don't know. All right, look, that actually ties all into my next question, like, perfectly. I love how this episode's going because, like, every conversation is just, like, steamrolling into the stuff. So we talked about you basically couldn't get the Republican Party nod without the G.A.R. for a long time. And I actually had the question of sort of like which way these, which way did the G.A.R. lean politically? So which president benefited most from the influence or support of the G.A.R.? I was going to ask which way did the G.A.R. lean, but we just answered that, right? They obviously lean very much so towards the Republican Party, and essentially, as you said, they could not get the nomination without the support of the G.A.R. And like 4 of the 5 that you mentioned were members. So who gets the most benefit of the G.A.R.'s influence or support on their way to the presidency and throughout it?
So it's really tough to say. In my opinion, it was Garfield. Because
the guy who was or wasn't.
In my opinion, I think he got the most out of it because he didn't want to run initially. It was, hey, you're the compromise of the Republican ticket, and then on top of it, if I remember correctly, he was going up against Hancock on the Democratic ticket.
Right.
So,
dude, he's superb.
Like, yeah, it's you've got to sit there and say, okay, Grant was a shoo-in regardless of the G.A.R.'s input. Like, Grant was a shoo-in. Then you've got, Rutherford B. Hayes, McKinley. McKinley's got and Harrison. It's though they won, and it wasn't as contested.
Oh, Hayes certainly was contested. I mean, that goes down to the vote in Congress. But
we just heard a lot about this election in the most current political cycle that we just went through. By the way, Matt and I have a ton of love for Rutherford B. Hayes and William McKinley because of their Maryland campaign connections. They Rutherford B. Hayes obviously gets shot up real good at South Mountain, and William McKinley has a monument at Antietam National Battlefield to all the baristas that are to come in the world. He is the battlefield barista. It's commemorating him bringing coffee to the troops on the front. That's a real thing. Matt, I see you shaking your head at me, and I know that you're dying because you're a guide on this field professionally, but is that not true? Is that monument not telling the story of him bringing coffee to troops under fire?
Coffee and sandwiches to the troops under fire. Now, the monument is actually there more because he had just been assassinated. It's more of a memorial to McKinley and his service in the 23rd Ohio Infantry. But yes, it does specifically call out his actions there.
What do visitors often leave at the monument?
Actually, I have not seen this before, but I have heard references of coffee being left at the monument.
How have you not seen it? So there's one there almost every time I go there.
I've actually not seen it happen.
What's even more shocking is when I go there, they're in the tin, they're in like bucket cups. And I'm like, how? Who's buying these like $15, $20, $30 cups and just leaving them here? People got money to blow.
Right? Can they send that my way so I can feed my reenacting addiction?
Exactly. You're like, it's you. You're wasting your cups, Ben. Stop leaving them at McKinley's monument.
Oh, trust me.
Sorry to derail you, but getting back to it. So we were talking about Hayes and McKinley and obviously they're G.A.R. members. So who do you think it is, man? Like that just benefits the most from the support?
Yeah, to me it was Garfield. I mean, it. And you brought up, as you were saying that, you bring up an interesting point with McKinley and the fact that of the 5, he was the only enlisted. All the other ones were officers.
Yeah.
So it's that makes another interesting aspect where the G.A.R. was, you had officers in it, but you also had enlisted men in it. So it's how much of that. So, but I still say it was Garfield. Just given the fact that he didn't even want to run initially, and he was going up against Hancock. So that's to me, those two things give him the edge. So
that's actually a really good analysis, Ben. I like that a lot. It's interesting that you mentioned McKinley being an enlisted man, because he certainly was. He gets bumped up to officer, I think in 1963, but his political opponents will actually use that against him. They claim that he was a rear echelon guy. Oh, he's a commissary sergeant, blah, blah, blah. Well, of course, we know he was under fire and he was doing these things that were very beneficial to the men in the ranks and that were on the firing line. But his political opponents tried to make him into this skulking in the back sort of guy and wearing the uniform and basically name only, that sort of thing.
Okay, a joke. Do you know how dangerous it is to deliver flatbread stuff and like decaf, frappe, mocha, whatever's under fire? All right, serious though. In reality, like how could you use that as a dig against someone? Hey, listen here, you guy who actually worked super hard and learned and cut it on the front ranks and has experience. And like, I don't understand how you could use somebody who like steps in the proverbial shit with their relatives, their comrades in arms, and like, how could you use that as a negative? Like, that guy's been down in the mud. He knows. Like, that guy's got the experience you want. That's not a detracting argument, bro. You're actually supporting that guy.
It's a different time frame, though, different mindset back then, where if you weren't on the front lines, you were considered, shirking your duty.
Right.
And, which brings me to another point. When I was reading it, I'm like, what, like, was it Cleveland? Grover Cleveland was, an executive in the New York State militia during the war.
Right.
And it's like, okay, you got
all types, brother.
Yeah, and so it's, I guess
he was quartermaster general for the state of New York. It was pretty high up there for
very
getting
logistical,
New York's
but not
troops into
very
the field.
dangerous.
Yeah, but it was one of those things where it's like, okay, I guess all's fair in love, war, and politics. So, it's different mindset. Whereas today we have the mindset of, hey, doesn't matter. You put the uniform on. You sign that blank check. Back then it was okay, like, yeah, but you're in a bandbox regiment. But
right.
What did you really do? Whereas completely different mindset, completely different mentality, and I'm not surprised that his opponents would try to use that against him.
Yeah. Now, with the maturing of the G.A.R. as we're moving into the era of the Sons of Union veterans really beginning to take over, we're going to have a lot of really high-profile reunions and national commemorations. Of course, the 25th commemoration of Gettysburg comes to mind, and the famous shaking hands over the wall, or even the 50th reunion for both Northern and Southern troops. How were the Sons in particular? Obviously, the G.A.R.'s got a lot to do with these reunions, but how were the Sons helping to support these national reunions and commemorations?
So there was, there's obviously they took part in it, especially like with the 50th, because it was the G.A.R. was in their waning years,
right?
But it's one of those where the majority of the research I found was on the G.A.R. and the U.C.V. and what they did together at the events.
The Sons were probably in the logistics and support role.
Exactly.
A lot of learning, because they're about to have all this stuff handed off to them. So they're probably, especially by the 50th, they're probably doing a lot of paying attention, because this is about to be their show soon.
100%. And you'll see, pictures of them where, because back then in the early 90s, the SUVCW, and it was, when they got together, it was more military style. So you'll see someone in a military uniform, and they could be military of the day, or they could be SUVCW, or S.U.V. as they were called back then, depending on what the uniform was.
Yeah.
They were definitely in a logistic role. there were a lot of groups that helped out to pull these things together. Because I mean, you have something like this happen, there's a ton of logistics. So, but yeah, that was the biggest takeaway that I found from it.
Matt, you mentioned the famous handshake over the wall, and it got me thinking. You know, since we got to know the guys up in addressing Gettysburg, Eric and I have had a lot of like chats about Gettysburg related things. Because as you know, very publicly, I'll admit, right, I'm a Maryland campaign guy, so that's the majority of my Civil War focus goes into that campaign. So, you know, I know the basics about Gettysburg. I could have a conversation pretty deep with you, but some of the super deep stuff, I'm pretty novice on. And so Eric was telling me one day that the handshake over the wall consists of veterans who weren't even at the battle. And most of those guys come from the Western Theater, and they were having the G.A.R. and their Confederate counterparts were having a hard time finding veterans who even wanted to participate, because the real life veterans who actually fought at that battle that were still alive had zero interest in shaking hands with each other over the wall.
There was something I read, and now I can't remember if it was the 25th or the 50th, where there was actually 7 or 8 Union on Confederate or Confederate on Union veteran murders during the reunion.
See, this is a topic I want to visit, because I know the deep rabbit hole of like post-war relations it's touchy 150, 160 years later. Mm-hmm. In the immediate years, like we could just imagine, or we can't, we really can't, obviously. But in getting to know Eric, you know, and he's really big in a Pennsylvania regiment. So he talks about like the dedication speeches and things like that for a lot of these monuments. And a lot of the speeches are visceral. So like when Matt mentioned that photo, the first thing that I thought of was the fact that none of those guys shaking hands in that very famous photo at Gettysburg actually likely fought at that battle. They were all likely from the Western Theater. And it's a wrap. We talk about rabbit holes, Matt. That is a deep rabbit hole I would like to get into, but that happened at one of those famous reunions Matt was asking you about.
Well, and we've got lots of accounts of the various G.A.R. posts or other veterans organizations coming out and writing articles and editorials against various monuments, or the speeches that were said at monuments, or having rebuttals to speeches and things of that nature, be it for a dedication of a Confederate monument, or denouncing monuments being placed up at the national battlefields. The battlefield boards for Antietam, Gettysburg, so forth and so on, had to deal with a lot of that. Absolutely. And that's, again, another rabbit hole we could go down.
I just want to speculate for a moment, just to make it clear. Like, I'm imagining when you, like, I've never heard like that there was a murder, much less multiple murders, but I wouldn't be surprised. But I just want to speculate for our listeners for a moment. If you're like me and you hear the word murder, you imagine some like really nefarious kind of crap, like right away. This is likely something and I can't use the word innocent because it likely results in death and violence at the very least, but these are older guys. So an argument that gets out of hand, somebody smacks somebody and they fall, they could die from that. That's technically a murder. Or somebody's got a cane and they go, like, you think Sumner in the Senate, right? And you get whacked in the head. Like, that's almost a murder. Like, things like that. So I just want to speculate for a moment that these interactions that Ben was talking about, if we look into them, which since I've never heard of them, we're absolutely going to look into them. We're likely just a bunch of old guy crimes that, you know, went the worst way they could possibly go. So try not to imagine these guys still, like, really going ham on each other. It was probably just like an argument that got out of control and grandpa fell.
You heard it here, folks. Old guy crimes. We're going to use that term.
I'm actually trying to find the article I read it in now. So
all right, well, so we're talking about obviously we're talking about these guys obviously getting older, right? So so even as they were getting older, the Civil War was beginning to fade from memory. Not fade, that's maybe not the correct word to use, but it was evolving into something else. But I'll say in the more modern context, like as the Civil War fades from memory, especially with each passing year, like how does the Sons of Union veterans envision the future, like of their work, or like how to just keep the soldiers' legacy active? Our buddy Henry in Rochester asked that question.
Yeah, so the biggest thing we've been doing we understand that we have to engage the younger crowd. So we've been doing a massive uptick with our social media and trying to expand our social media footprint to get this information out at people's fingertips. Whether it be on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, we're striving to get this information out there. You'll see come May, our Memorial Day weekend, we do a feature on all of our social media platforms where where we do a quick bio and a photo of a soldier that didn't come home. That way, it's putting a face to a name. It's getting it out there, and we're using hashtag Memorial Day, trending. We're trying to use trending hashtags. So we're not just sending it to people that follow us, but trying to get people who might not have otherwise known about our organization, but also the sacrifice and how big of a sacrifice it was, and how much this war affected people, day in and day out, but also for years to come, where you had, towns where they would send all their young men off to war, and, a fraction of them came back. That's how we're doing stuff like this, the podcasts that we've been on, and we understand that we have to embrace the digital age, but it also doesn't take away from the work in the field that we're doing, where it's, hey, we're getting into cemeteries and doing cemetery cleanups, restoring headstones. We also just announced a national initiative where we're trying to get our camps and departments to sponsor food and blood drives to help the local communities out.
Nice.
So that way, we're all in trying times right now with COVID. So it's blood banks are at an all-time low, food banks are at an all-time low, and any way that we can help those areas, we want to help, because that's also it's showing people that we're not just as I put in my recent instruction, we're not a bunch of history nerds, even though we proudly bear that title. But we're doing more in the community than just preserving these guys' memories. And by doing more in the community, we can get the word out there more, because then people are going to be like, oh, who's the Sons of Union veterans of the Civil War? What do they do? What do you guys do? What are you guys all about? And bam, we got the foot in the door, and now we can go and we can tell them all about who we are, but also who these boys were and what they were, what they did. And that's our end game.
That's a great initiative, Ben. And you're a father. You mentioned the boys in our last episode, and of course we've seen them in the background there today, making kind of guest appearances. But in your role as both the National Patriotic Instructor for the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War, but also as a father figure, how are you delivering this to your boys? Not just the young folks coming out there and interested, but how are you introducing all this to them?
Who's making a guest appearance on the podcast right now?
So this is Chase. This is my oldest.
What's up, Chase? Welcome to the show, buddy.
5 years old.
What's that?
He's 5 years old.
Oh, man, that's awesome. I'm going to be 35 years old. That's super old. It's not as old as Matt, though. Matt is really old.
Thanks for that.
3 years older.
Yep, your brother is 3 years old.
Awesome.
You will go be 4 years older.
Yep.
He almost.
All right, buddy. So, we as far as getting the boys, as you just heard, my boys are 5 and 3. So they're still a little bit too young to be doing the nitty gritty work that we do in the cemeteries.
Sure.
We do. I mean, my camp does a lot of heavy lifting. We've got 3 tripods that we use to upright, 1 ton and a half gravestones that have been toppled over. But we do flagging details. And my hope is that this year, you know, I can take Chase out and, you know, show him what Daddy does and what Papa does. You know, Papa's my dad, his grandfather. What his Uncle Joe, his Uncle Mark, his Uncle Hans does, his Uncle Steve does. Because, you know, these are some of my closest friends that, you know, they all call my boys call them uncle when they come over and hang out and whatnot. So, and we do want to teach them the importance of what we do, the importance of memorializing these men and remembering these men. And when we're in the cemeteries cleaning them up, it's men and women. It's, if you're a veteran, we're going to take care of you. It's not, you know, Civil War vet, Vietnam War vet, World War II vet, doesn't matter. If you serve this country, we're going to make sure you got a flag on your grave. We're going to make sure your grave's taken care of. That's us personally. That's our thank you to them and their service to our country. And, you know, we got to make sure that they understand that, you know. I think
that's important, Ben. You're touching on it, right? Attitude and community are my personal beliefs of how, and I think that's what you're just describing, are how we continue these legacies, right? Like, you got to meet your audience, you got to meet whatever your target, wherever they are, right? You got to come with a newer style attitude. So engaging in the podcast, the social medias, using a hipper voice, like we use a bunch of heavy metal on this show. Like, if you're coming to this show expecting to hear a history podcast that's introed by like snare drums and some of the traditional stuff we hear, not that there's anything wrong with that. That's just not who we are. Matt and I are big nerds, but one of the things Matt and I get away from our nerddom is we both love a good bit of heavy metal. You know, we got some swagger. So we decided, like, you know, since I had another life as a musician, that, you know, we were gonna like flare a little bit out of that and like have a new attitude. So like that, you know, hopefully is helping to draw people in, because they're like, what the hell is the history podcast? But and then just the fact that you're on social media, but also the community thing is super important, because like a lot of the guys whose legacy you're preserving, they fought to preserve a union. They fought to preserve these communities so that they could exist in the ways that, you know, they could grow and flourish. And so just being an active part in them in their modern context is a good way to honor those legacies, because you are, you know, participating in the blood drives. And I'm sure you guys, like you were saying in the first episode, have been involved in the COVID pandemic in a positive way in your communities. And I just think that those two things are important, because it doesn't just say, hey, we're here for yesterday, meaning the memory of the Civil War veteran. We're here for right now. We're here for your Vietnam vet. We're here for your World War II Korea. We're here for your Gulf War vets, or your more modern day Iraq and Afghan war vets. So good for you guys. I think you're hitting it right on the head with, you know, community and attitude is how we move this forward. Thank you.
Yeah. It's big. It's big with us. You know, across the country, we've got departments and camps that all take part in Reach Across America. You know, that's a lot of camps are really big in that. We've got groups that
great program,
very great program. We've got groups that they'll go into soldiers' homes and VA homes, and they'll be in Civil War uniforms, and they'll just go in and you know, do an ice cream social to help build morale, or bring, you know, sponsor a movie night, or, you know, whatever, some type of thing to help take care of the modern veterans. Our organization is also doing as well in different areas. So it is definitely big for us to make sure that we're taking care of the community as well. Again, you know, it's something I want my boys to learn. You know, they can't officially join the order until 8 years old. That's when you can join as a junior member. So at 8 years old, my oldest will be joining. So yeah, it's you know, we want them to learn that, you know, and also I come from a military family. My dad was a Marine. My grandfather was in the Army for 40 years. So it's something that is very, very close to us. I mean, my wife is in the Army. She's actually away at school right now for the Army.
Wonderful.
So it's
thank her. Thank you for your service.
Yeah, well,
thank you both for your service.
Well,
all you guys.
Thank you. But yeah, so she, you know, so the boys know firsthand, you know, what it's like to, you know, they see it with their mom, they see it with me when I go to the cemetery cleanups, to give back to the community and the importance of it. You know, so it's definitely something that's near and dear to our heart as a family, but also, as an organization.
One request, dad to dad, since obviously you're going to be having a super major big impact in handing off this legacy to your own kids.
Yep.
Make sure they know Buster is fake when you show them the movie Gettysburg. He's not a real person.
Yes.
Don't need to get attached. He's not a real guy.
Nope.
Armpit or not, sympathetic or not, dude's not real.
Great character, but not real.
There's a great difference between us, Colonel Darling. Yeah, sorry, derail. Just I always think about that when people have a hand in like handing off these legacies. A lot of things they do is go the pop culture route, and they're like, "Here, watch this movie," and it's like, if you watch Glory, you're like, "Oh, sweet," Matthew Broderick and Carrie Elwes, the Dread Pirate Roberts. I don't know how to say his real last name, so I'm just going to call him the Dread Pirate Roberts. But Major Forbes, not a real person either.
Not a real guy. Well, that's one of the things. That's one of the things that I think that movie missed was that Frederick Douglass' son, Lewis, was the sergeant major of the 54th. Yep. Not Morgan Freeman.
That's a big miss. That's not even a little miss. That's like a freaking huge miss.
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of the things that we actually, obviously with February being Black History Month, the Suns is our social media campaign is right now is to bring light all of what the USCT and the African Americans did during the war, and one of the people we are highlighting is Lewis Douglas.
I got a guy for you.
Yep.
His name's Alfred Hilton. He's up in the north of Baltimore County area. So I don't know if he's Harford County or a little further north, but he's a Medal of Honor recipient. I think he lost his life in 1865, but he did it not only keeping the state colors upright that he was carrying, but making sure that the national colors as well, when they had gone down, he picked those up. And as he was taking a lot of bullets, he made sure that those flags never fell. So Alfred Hilton is a Medal of Honor recipient. He's got a Civil War Trails. So shout out to Drew Gruber with the Civil War Trails. He's got a wayside marker up there somewhere north of Baltimore. And you know how you can dedicate highways and all that stuff. He's got a highway dedicated to him. I think it's somewhere up around, I want to say Abingdon or Aberdeen, somewhere north of Baltimore. But he's a guy you should look up for the SUVCW there.
Yeah, definitely will. So thank you.
So winding down here, right? We've thrown some heavy questions, some silly questions. We've made fun of Matt for not knowing who is playing in the Super Bowl, and that it includes not even probably, I'm just going to say this because I'm all about saying definitive, controversial statements. However, caveat, this is not super controversial. At this point, Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback that's ever played.
Oh, yeah.
Ever.
Oh, yeah.
Matt didn't even know he was playing in the Super Bowl for like a record 10th time. So, winding down all the stuff we've talked about today, I was talking to Matt about this when I was kind of gawking. I was like, yeah, I couldn't even believe I found a G.A.R. monument down in Old Stewart, Florida. Because if you go there today, there's not a lot of support for the blue. If you were to talk to them about the Civil War, they're not a very pro-blue area. So I was a little stunned by that, but it got us talking. So Ben, final question.
Yep.
What's the most obscure location that someone is going to find a G.A.R. or like a G.A.R. post or an S.U.V. camp in? Like, are there international posts? Like, where's the weirdest one?
As far as the G.A.R. is concerned, the most obscure one was actually in Lima, Peru.
Peru. Wow.
What? Guys would gather on Machu Picchu and talk about that time they defended the hill. And they were like, Fredericksburg, but in Peru.
Yep, Peru. So to our knowledge, there were 10 international posts for the G.A.R., 8 in Canada, 1 in Mexico, and 1 in Peru. For the SUVCW, we have 1 international camp in London.
Yep. I thought so.
Yep.
In London?
So, yep.
That's
so
terrible.
They actually put out some really good material, too. They visited stateside a couple of years back and hit a bunch of the battlefields in our area, including Monocacy. And they have a really in-depth newsletter they put out. They bring in some international speakers. Tom Clemens has been asked over there a couple of times. Pat and I know him very well, a fantastic historian on the Maryland campaign.
Are posts like that filled with members who are more like lineage members? Like, because like, how do you, if you're in England, just randomly go, I want to become a member of the SUVCW, unless you are descended from a Civil War, Union veteran who might have emigrated or traveled or settled down, whatever the correct term is, over in England post-war?
Yeah. So to form a camp, you actually have to start 5 lineal members. And then go through the whole paperwork process. And then from there, we actually have a certain ratio you have to keep from lineal to associate. So lineal is someone who can trace to a direct ancestor that served in the war. And then an associate is someone who has no direct connection. We have a ratio that you have to keep at the camp level. So once you hit that limit, you can't take on any more associates at the camp level. Yep.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, so it's
you can't sit here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been something that, we are a lineal organization, so we do feel as if that we need, we want to be open to people who don't have lineal in their blood, but at the same time, we have to stick to our roots.
Well, and it encourages the research too to find those connections.
So there were 5 Brits who were willing to admit they had Yankee ancestry.
Yep.
And make it official and start a camp.
At the very least, there were 5 of them, and it was actually they do great work out there. I'm pulling up one of we actually featured their camp.
I make that joke just because they lovingly still refer to us as the colonies.
Yeah.
So I could imagine that they got some of their buddies, their mates are like, really? Like willing to admit you're descended from them, from the colonies? You know how I learned that? Like, as Ben looks that up, I learned that from a Wendy's episode. Like,
really?
20 years ago, watching TV, Wendy's was advertising like a new burger, and they put some guy from England on there, and he was like, not bad for something from the colonies. And I was like, burn. Like, wow. My dad at the time was working for a company called British Telecom. He's like, oh yeah, that's a thing. Like they still call us the colonies. And apparently it's not just us, it's other places. It's basically the whole world. God damn it, England.
But yeah, so the camp out there is the Ensign John Davis camp. And we featured about a year and a half ago, I believe. Yeah, July of 2019, so almost 2 years ago now. They did a stone rededication where they actually got a U.S. VA headstone shipped out to the United Kingdom.
Wow.
Installed it. They had representation from both the British military and the U.S. Embassy over there showed up to the rededication, presented American flag to the ancestor, to the next of kin, and had a very nice moving ceremony to honor it was Major Seth Herrick. I hope I'm saying his last name right. Of the 2nd Maryland Eastern Shore Infantry.
Marylander.
Yep, he enlisted as a private, was discharged as a major. His great grandson is the assistant army attaché from the U.S. Embassy. His great grandson was there. The assistant army attaché from the U.S. Embassy, Lieutenant Colonel Jesse Moore, was in attendance, as well as the Barnett Borough Mayor. So they actually had local government there as well.
He's from a part of Maryland that's actually divided. We talk about Maryland's overblown, divided border state thing where everybody's like, it was a state divided. No, it really wasn't. But the Eastern Shore was an area where there was some interesting sort of feelings on the American Civil War. So that's being a Union Second Marylander, ending all the way up out in England. I was not expecting you to drop that one. That's pretty cool.
So it was definitely a cool find. It was definitely something that when
very cool find
when it came across our news desk, if you will, we definitely got it up.
Every time you come on the show, I learned something about Maryland that I never knew. The first time you here, you told me about Wheaton. I was like, I couldn't even believe that. I looked that up. I was like, holy crap. That is so true.
Yep.
Yeah. So thanks. You should just come back and teach me about my home state more often.
Hey, I'm here to serve. So, but you
do it well, man. Let's end it with a compliment. You do it well. The work you do with the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War is very noble. It's awesome. We've had a lot of obviously private conversations, and then also here between two episodes that talk about the work you guys do. And it's really, really cool. And as always, Matt and I, in any way we can be of assistance, we're very willing and able to do that. So any parting words from you before we go ahead and get on out of here, Ben? We had a good time, man.
Yeah, always. Thanks for having me back on, and I appreciate you guys having us on to do this for us. And stay safe with the weather. It just started snowing up here, so stay safe with the snow and enjoy the game tonight. And
that's right. Yeah. Go Bucks! Even though I'm a Giants fan.
Yeah, even though I'm a Panthers fan, I'm rooting interdivision right there.
It's harder for you to say than it is for me. It's really hard for Matt to say because he has no freaking clue what we're talking about. So, all right, guys. Well, look, just a couple things before we get on out of here, right? Obviously the show has been growing over the last year. We moved into season 2 and some new opportunities in front of us. So we'll be talking about some partnerships and things like that we have moving forward. So we're very excited, like we said at the beginning of the show, to be partnering with G.A.R. Historical for all of their historical fan gear stuff. They got T-shirts and stickers and all that. You can use the promo code HistoryThings on their website to get 10% off your next purchase. So you'll be hearing a lot about that moving forward. Matt's got some news on his book coming up in the next episode. We'll get to that. So we're very excited. Do you have any teasers, Matt? Like, I know you got some news. Do you just want to hold it? It's up to you, bud.
Yeah, the teaser is the manuscript is done and has been edited, so it's getting ready to go out, but we've got some bigger announcements and things coming up.
Very exciting. So we love to stump for the literary works of our author in residence, Matt Borders. We had a good time. We learned a lot about the fraternal organizations that existed in the wake of the American Civil War, specifically the Grand Army of the Republic, which led into Ben's organization, the Sons of Union Veterans, the Sons of Union Veterans of the American Civil War. I honestly, out of everything that we talked about today, I can't even believe you told me there was one in Lima, Peru. Like, you've thrown some curveballs at me today as a baseball guy. I can tell you, like most hitters, not really great at hitting the curve. We're not expecting Lima, Peru. So good job. You struck me out.
You just got to sit back and shoot it the other way. So
I appreciate it. Well, all right. Well, we always appreciate you guys stopping by and listening to the History Things podcast. As always, follow us on Facebook and Instagram at the History Things podcast. Follow Matt and I at Matt Borders Books. You can follow me at History Things with Pat, or you can follow our guests today, the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War, at SUVCW. We thank you all for listening to the History Things podcast, brought to you by G.A.R. Historical. We will see you in quarter 2, where we have guest Kobe Treadway on deck. We are going to talk about the Lincoln assassination, and then a little bit after that, we'll get into the trial of the conspirators themselves. So we got a ton of really good, meaty stuff to get into, and we can't wait to hang out with you all. So, for the History Things podcast, for my co-host, Matt Borders, I'm your co-host, Pat McGuire. Joining us today was Ben Frail, National Patriotic Instructor of the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War. We thank you all for listening. We will catch you all next time. Love you. Later.
You've been listening to the History Things podcast. Follow the guys guys on Facebook and Instagram at the History Things Podcast for all the latest news and exclusives. Make sure to also follow Pat and Matt on their social medias at History Things with Pat and at Matt Borders Books. Have a question, comment, or compliment for the show? Send us an email at historythingspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show.